All right, so we are going to go over some remediation for Unit 4A, summative number 3. So this was solving quadratics using any method. So this is the review sheet. You may or may not have this already, but I am actually going to start with the last question. I already have this written out, so you can always pause me after I'm finished talking here and copy it down. Or just as I'm talking, you can get that down. So what are the three methods to solving quadratics, and when should I use each? So remember, a quadratic means anything that has an x squared. So there's a couple different types of equations you might see. So the first one would be this first type, where this is a quadratic written out in standard form. Okay, so it's ax squared plus bx plus c. That means that there is an x squared term and an x term, not just an x squared. Okay, there's an x squared and an x. That's super important. If you have that, then your options are either factoring, okay, or if you have that same form, an x squared and an x term, then you could also do quadratic formula. Okay, you could do quadratic formula either way, but if it's factorable, factoring is a little bit quicker and less room for error. Okay, now the other type, basically if it does not look like one of these two, right, which are the same thing, then it is square roots. Okay, that is basically when you don't have just an x term, you have like an x squared or parentheses squared, not both. Okay. So if you haven't already, pause me, jot those three things down, and then I'm going to go back up to actually do some solving. Okay, so first thing, so these say solve. So I'm not using the discriminant, we'll get to that later, but these just say solve. So solve the quadratic using any method, and then we want you to state the method too. So number one, as I look at this, I have an x squared and I have an x term. Right away, I should know that is not the square root method. You cannot square root if there's an x squared and an x. So my first thought should be, let's factor it, right? I should try to factor it. So I'm going to draw my x. We always multiply to the last and add to the middle. So I want a pair of numbers that multiplies to negative 15 and adds to negative 2. So that would be negative 5 and positive 3. That would fit both qualifications. So I would write my factors out first. Those aren't my answers. Those are just my factors. And then we branch these out. We use our zero product property, set them equal to 0, and solve them. So if I add 5, I would get positive 5. And if I subtract 3, I'd get negative 3. Okay, and then this method was factoring. I could have used quadratic formula, but it would get a little bit messier. Okay, now if I look at, so number 1 looked like this, number 2 looks almost identical, so I would try to factor it. So we multiply to the last, add to the middle. Now the only things that multiply to 5 would be 1 and 5, and there's nothing I could do to those to get them to add to negative 2. So if you can't factor, so I'm just going to erase this. If you can't factor, that means we have to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so that's the method we're going to use on this one, quadratic formula. I have it written down at the top of my paper here. If you don't have it written on your review already, I would suggest writing that. So I'm just going to copy and paste mine. Maybe. Maybe not. Okay, I'm just going to rewrite it. So opposite of b, plus or minus, big square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so I think it does help if we write the a, the b, the c. So it goes a, b, c. So a is 1, b is negative 2, c is 5. So let's plug those in. So it's opposite of b. So the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2, plus or minus. B squared, so that's negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. Oops, all over 2 times a, which is 1. All right, so next step is to do the inside of our square root, okay? So you can type that exactly how it looks in a calculator. Okay, so be 4 minus 20, so you should get negative 16. Just do this right in a calculator without the square root symbol. Okay, now you have to look and see, can I simplify this? So this part, yes, you can simplify. Okay, so off to the side somewhere, I'm going to simplify the square root of negative 16. So remember, you can take out a negative 1, leave the 16. Square root of negative 1 is I. Square root of 16 is just 4. So that part becomes 4i. So square root of negative 16 now is just 4i. So when I go to write this, it's 2 plus or minus 4i all over 2. Okay, and then if you're in my class, Mrs. Patterson's class, I'm fine with you just leaving it like that. You can technically simplify it a little bit more by dividing those two, but I'm okay with this. Okay? All right, then, so again, those two looked almost exactly the same, right? They had the A, the B, the C, but when we factored, when we used quadratic formula. Number 3 does not even look like either of those, right? There's not 3 terms. It just has an x squared. If it just has an x squared, there's no x, just regular x, then you can get x squared by itself. So this one we would want to divide by 3 first. And then 54 divided by 3, let me grab my calculator. 54 divided by negative 3 is negative 18. Now if we want to get x alone, we'll square root both sides. And then remember, as soon as you take a square root, it's plus or minus. Now this is negative 1 and 18. And we just remembered the square root of negative 1 is I. 18, we can break that down to 9 and 2. All right, so we have square root of 9 is 3, root 2, you still have this I, so we can rewrite this as plus or minus 3i root 2. Okay, so that method was the square root method. We took a square root. Okay, number 3, again, this one does not look like one of the first two. It's not x squared and x written out like that. So this one, we want to get the parentheses squared by itself. So if we want to do that, we got to get rid of this 3. So we'll divide by 3 on both sides. So now we have x plus 2 squared equals 7. 21 divided by 3 is 7. Now I want to square root both sides. Can't get rid of the 2 until you take the square root. You can drop the parentheses. Now again, you took the square root, so this is plus or minus the square root of 7. We can't simplify the square root of 7. So now minus 2. This does not become plus or minus the square root of 5. Those are not like terms, so we just have to leave it written out like this. Okay, so it's plus or minus the square root of 7 and then minus 2. And that was also the square root method. Okay, so those are your 3 methods. So study those, just look at how the problems looked, what method we used based on how the problem looked. Get used to that, okay? When we flip to the back side, now we go to the discriminant. So the discriminant tells you how many solutions there are. It doesn't tell you what the solution is. It just tells you how many there are. Okay, so that is b squared minus 4ac. That is just the part underneath the square root in the quadratic formula. Okay, if that number, when you type in your calculator, is bigger than 0, meaning positive, then your equation has 2 real solutions. If that number, the discriminant, is equal to 0, then you have 1 real solution. And if that number is, I should say negative, less than 0, then you have 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, so we're going to use that chart for these problems right here. Find the number of solutions. It does not say solve, it says find the number of solutions. So we're just going to do b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so you have your A, your B, your C. Okay, so B is 2, minus 4A is 1, C is 1. Okay, could just do this in a calculator. You don't really need a calculator though. This is 4 minus 4, which is 0, but 0 is not my answer. 0 means that there are one real solution. There is one real solution. Okay, maybe pause me and try B and C. Okay, hopefully you tried these. So you got your A, your B, your C. So B squared, please make sure you put this in parentheses. If not, your calculator doesn't do it right. Okay, so this would be 16 minus 4 times 5 is 20. So you should get -4. And a negative number means that you have two imaginary solutions. Okay, so let's check the last one. So again, B squared minus 4AC. We're just trying to find how many answers there are. Got A, B, C. So B squared, that's 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. So again, you can do this in a calculator, but you should get a +9. And a positive discriminant means two real solutions. Okay, so use that discriminant when we're just asking you to find the number of solutions, not actually solving. Okay, if it says solve, that's one of these. Okay, last question. What methods could you use to solve x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0? Okay, I'm not asking you to actually solve it, just what methods could you use? So this is just recognizing what form this looks like. So it has an A, it has a B, it has a C. So that means it's either factoring or quadratic formula. Okay, you could use either, but try factoring first, and if factoring doesn't work, then you'd have to do quadratic formula. Again, not asking you to solve that one, just to be able to identify what methods you could use. Okay, so practice the questions that you've been asked. Let your teacher know if you need any extra help, but then let us know when you want to do a retake. Okay, thanks.